The arrow flies through 12 axe heads, a shot no living man could make. The suitors freeze, the beggar in rags rises, and his disguise falls away like shed skin. 20 years of waiting end in a single heartbeat. Odysseus notches another arrow. 108 men who devoured his home, now trapped with the man they mocked. How does a king become a beggar in his own hall? How does 10 years of war become 10 more years of wandering? This is the story that named every long journey. Odysseus left for Troy when his son was an infant. Telemachus grew to manhood never knowing his father's face. Only stories of a clever king who sailed away. Penelope wove by day and unwove by night. 3 years of the same shroud, buying time against 100 men who wanted her throne and her hand. What trials could hold back the man who broke Troy? What gods could hate him enough to steal a decade from his life? The sea remembers. The sea will tell. Get comfortable now. Adjust your pillow, find your warmth. This story has crossed 3,000 years to reach you tonight, from Homer's voice to mine. If you drift off before Odysseus reaches home, that's perfect. He would understand, the hero who dreamed of sleep on foreign shores for 10 long years. Our story begins where another ends. On the beaches of Troy, victory complete, fires still burning. Odysseus stands among heroes ready to sail home. Home seems so close. 10 years they fought for Helen's return. 10 years of blood and bronze and loss. Now Odysseus commands 12 ships filled with Ithacan warriors hungry for home. The wind favored them first. Ithaca lay just 2 weeks' sail across the Aegean. Odysseus could already taste the wine from his own vineyards, see his wife's face. Then they passed the Cicons coast. The men saw an easy target, a rich town, poorly defended. Odysseus warned against stopping. His men wanted plunder. The raid succeeded easily. Too easily. Wine flowed, sheep roasted on spits, the Greeks celebrated through the night. Odysseus paced the beach, watching the hills. Dawn revealed what darkness had hidden, dust clouds on the hills. The Cicons had summoned their neighbors. Thousands of warriors descending to avenge the raid. The Greeks scrambled for their ships, still drunk, still fumbling with armor. 6 men from each ship fell on that beach, 72 who would never see home again. Odysseus had warned them. They hadn't listened. As the ships fled into open water, he learned the first lesson of his journey. Command means nothing when men choose greed over wisdom. A storm caught them 3 days later. Zeus sent the north wind screaming for 9 days straight, driving them past every familiar landmark into waters no Greek had sailed. On the 10th day they found calm waters and a strange coastline. Sweet flowers bloomed everywhere. The natives welcomed them smiling, offering fruit from their hands. The lotus eaters meant no harm. That was what made them dangerous. They smiled as they offered the flowers, gentle as grandparents feeding children sweets. 3 scouts tasted the lotus. Within moments their eyes glazed with contentment. They forgot Troy, forgot their families. Forgot they had ever wanted anything but this sweetness. Odysseus found them weeping when he tried to drag them back. Not from pain, from the loss of the lotus. They begged to stay, clinging to the flowers like drowning men to driftwood. He bound them beneath the rowing benches and ordered immediate departure. No one else would taste the lotus. Some poisons taste like honey, that was the lesson. Days later, the fleet found a new island. Forested mountains rising from the sea, wild goats visible on the cliffs. Smoke curled from caves across a narrow strait. Odysseus chose 12 of his best men and rowed across to investigate. Curiosity drove him. He wanted to know what manner of people lived in those caves. It was a choice he would regret. The cave mouth gaped like a god's doorway. Inside, they found cheese racks, milk pails, lamb pens, signs of a prosperous shepherd. But everything was built to an impossible scale. The men begged Odysseus to take the cheese and flee. He refused. He wanted to meet the cave's owner, perhaps receive guest gifts. Hospitality was sacred law among the Greeks. Earth shook with footsteps. Bleating sheep flooded through the entrance. Behind them came a shadow that blocked the dying light. A man tall as a ship's mast, with one eye in his forehead. Polyphemus rolled a boulder across the entrance, a stone so vast that 20 wagons couldn't shift it. The Greeks were sealed inside with a giant who had not yet noticed them. The Cyclops lit his fire. The flames revealed the Greeks cowering in the corner. Polyphemus's single eye found them, and his voice boomed like thunder in a barrel. "Strangers," the giant rumbled, "who are traitors or pirates?" Odysseus stepped forward, claiming hospitality in Zeus's name. The Cyclops laughed, a sound like rock slides. "Zis," Polyphemus sneered. "We Cyclopes care nothing for your gods. We are older and stronger." He reached into the huddle of Greeks and grabbed 2 men in one massive fist. What happened next no survivor could speak of without trembling. The giant ate them, bones and all, while the Greeks watched helpless, their screams echoing off stone walls. Polyphemus belched, wiped his mouth, and fell asleep beside his sheep. Odysseus drew his sword to kill the monster, then stopped. The boulder. Only the Cyclops could move it. All night Odysseus planned while his men wept. In the corner lay a massive olive, wood club green and thick as a ship's mast. A weapon, perhaps. A tool. An idea began to form. Morning came. Polyphemus woke, ate 2 more men for breakfast, then rolled aside the boulder to let his sheep out to graze. He sealed the Greeks inside again and left. Odysseus set his men to work. They cut a section from the olive club, sharpened it to a point, and hardened the tip in the fire's embers, a stake for a giant's eye. When Polyphemus returned that evening, Odysseus greeted him with wine, the powerful vintage he'd brought from his ship. No water to dilute it. "Gift," he said, from a grateful guest. The Cyclops demanded more and more. 3 bowls of unmixed wine, enough to fell a god. "Your name, little man," he slurred. "Tell me your name, and I'll give you a guest gift." "My name," said Odysseus, "is Nobody. My father and mother call me Nobody, and so do all my friends." The Cyclops grinned. "Then Nobody I shall eat last. That is my gift to you." The giant collapsed into drunken sleep. Odysseus didn't wait. He and his 4 strongest men lifted the olive stake and thrust it into the fire until it glowed red. They drove it into the Cyclops' single eye. Odysseus leaned his weight into the stake, twisting it like a shipwright's drill. The hiss of burning flesh filled the cave. Polyphemus woke screaming. His roar shook the mountain. He tore the stake free and flung it blindly, then crashed about the cave searching for his tormentors, but he could not see. Other Cyclopes heard the screaming. They gathered outside, calling through the boulder. "Polyphemus, what's wrong? Who is hurting you?" And the blinded giant wailed back, "Nobody is killing me!
Nobody has blinded me."
The other Cyclopes shrugged. If nobody was hurting him, what could they do? They went back to their caves. Odysseus's trick had worked, but escape remained impossible. Polyphemus sat by the entrance all night, arms spread, waiting to catch anyone who tried to slip past. Morning would bring another chance, or another meal. Dawn came. The sheep bleated to be let out to pasture. Polyphemus moved the boulder and sat in the opening, running his hands over each sheep's back as it passed. No Greek would slip by riding on top. But Odysseus had already prepared. He'd bound his men underneath the sheep, 3 rams per man, the Greek hanging beneath the middle one. The blind giant felt only wool above. Odysseus went last, clinging to the belly of the largest ram, Polyphemus's favorite. The giant paused, stroking its fleece. "Dear ram, why are you last today? Do you grieve for your master's eye?" The ram walked on. Odysseus dropped free outside the cave, cut his men loose, and drove the sheep toward the waiting ship. They rowed for their lives toward the fleet. Safe at sea, Odysseus could not resist. He stood at the stern and shouted back at the shore, "Cyclops, the man who blinded you was no nobody. Remember the name. Odysseus, king of Ithaca, raider of cities, son of Laertes! I am the one who took your eye." His men groaned. That name would be their curse for years to come. Polyphemus tore a boulder from the cliffside and hurled it toward the voice. It crashed into the sea just behind their ship, the wave nearly driving them back to shore. Then the Cyclops prayed. He raised his arms to his father, Poseidon, god of the sea, Father, make Odysseus suffer. Let him lose all his companions. Let him find trouble at home. Poseidon heard. The sea god vowed that Odysseus would never have an easy voyage home. One act of pride, one shout too many, and 10 years of suffering began. The fleet sailed on, seeking any friendly port. They found the floating island of Aeolus, king of the winds, who welcomed them with a month of feasting and stories. When Odysseus departed, Aeolus gave him a gift beyond price, a leather bag containing all the storm winds. Only the gentle west wind remained free, to blow them straight home. 9 days they sailed with perfect wind. On the 10th morning, Odysseus saw Ithaca on the horizon. The smoke from its hearth fires, the shape of its mountains, home at last. Exhausted from 9 days at the helm, Odysseus finally slept, and in his sleep, his men whispered together. What treasure had Aeolus given their captain? Why wouldn't he share? They opened the bag. Every storm wind of the world screamed free at once, a hurricane that seized the fleet and hurled it backward across the sea. Ithaca vanished into the distance. The Greeks who first told this story lived surrounded by sea. Every island was its own world, every voyage a journey into the unknown. Storms meant death. To these seafaring people, Odysseus wasn't just a hero, he was the ideal man. Clever, adaptable, enduring. The sea doesn't reward strength alone, it rewards those who think. Every monster he faced reflected real terrors of ancient sailing. Whirlpools that swallowed ships. Rocky coasts that smashed them. Strange islands where men were lost to madness or worse. When Greek fathers told their children about Odysseus, they were teaching survival. Notice everything. Trust no one completely. And never, ever boast when you've escaped danger. 3,000 years later, we still learn from his journey. The word, Odyssey, itself means any long, difficult voyage. We're all trying to get home in our own ways. The winds carried them all the way back to Aeolus's island. When Odysseus begged for help again, the Wind King refused. The gods hate you. Aeolus said, I cannot help one so cursed. 6 days they rode without wind, arms burning, spirits broken. On the 7th day, they found a harbor so perfect it seemed made for them. High cliffs encircling calm water. Odysseus alone felt unease. He moored his ship outside the harbor entrance. When his scouts climbed the cliff path, they found people, enormously tall, watching with hungry eyes. The Laestrygonians were giants, cannibal giants. They lined the cliff tops above the harbor and hurled boulders down onto the trapped ships. The harbor became a killing floor. The giants speared the swimming men like fish. 11 ships with all their crews, gone in minutes. Only Odysseus's ship escaped, outside the harbor, cutting its ropes and fleeing. 1 ship remained of 12, 1 crew of all who had left Troy. Odysseus sailed on, grief-hollowed, into waters where no Greek had traveled before. Unknown shores beckoned ahead. They found an island thick with forests, smoke rising from a clearing. Odysseus divided his remaining men. Half would stay with the ship, half would explore. He had learned caution. Eurylochus led the exploring party. They found a stone house in the forest, surrounded by wolves and lions. But the beasts didn't attack. They fawned like dogs, tails wagging. From inside came a woman's voice, singing at her loom. The melody was heartbreakingly beautiful. The Greeks called out, and a goddess opened the door. Circe, the witch. She welcomed them with food and wine. Wine mixed with honey, cheese and barley. And something else. As soon as they drank, their bodies began to change. Snots pushed through faces. Hands curved into hooves. Bristles sprouted from skin. Within moments, all of them were pigs, though their minds remained human, trapped in animal bodies. Circe drove them to her pigsty with her wand. Only Eurylochus had stayed outside, suspecting treachery. He ran back to the ship, barely able to speak through his terror. Odysseus heard the report and armed himself immediately. His men begged him not to go. They would lose their captain too. But Odysseus had no choice. His men were beasts in a pen. On the path to Circe's house, a young man appeared, too beautiful to be mortal. It was Hermes, messenger of the gods, sent by Athena to help her favorite hero. Hermes gave Odysseus a plant called moly, white flower, black root. Eat this before you drink her wine. Her magic will not touch you. Then put your sword to her throat. Odysseus ate the moly and walked into the witch's house. Circe welcomed him, served the poisoned wine, and struck him with her wand. Nothing happened. Odysseus drew his sword. "What man are you?" Circe gasped. "No mortal has ever resisted my magic." Odysseus demanded his men restored. The witch fell to her knees and swore an oath of peace. She led him to the pigsty and anointed each pig with a new drug. They rose back into men, younger and taller than before, weeping with relief, embracing their captain. Circe invited Odysseus to stay, to rest, to feast, to recover from his losses. The witch who would have destroyed him became his host, and in time. 1 year they stayed on Aea, then another. The men forgot their urgency to return home, but finally they came to Odysseus. "Captain, we must leave, or we never will." Odysseus asked Circe for sailing directions home. Her face grew grave. "You cannot go home yet. First, you must visit the land of the dead and speak with the prophet Tiresias." The land of the dead. No living man had gone there and returned. Odysseus's crew wept when they heard. But if a prophet's guidance was the price of homecoming, Odysseus would pay it. Circe gave them instructions: sail to the edge of the world where the sun never shines. There, dig a pit, sacrifice black sheep, and call the dead with blood. They would come. They sailed beyond the edge of known waters, into mists that never lifted, cold that never eased. The sun dimmed and failed. They had reached the borderlands between worlds. Odysseus dug the pit as Circe had instructed. He cut the sheep's throats over it, letting black blood fill the hole. Then he sat with his sword drawn, waiting for the dead. They came. First as whispers, then as shadows, then as pale forms crowding toward the blood. Every ghost who had ever died pressed forward, desperate to taste life again. Odysseus held them back with his bronze blade. Only Tiresias could drink first, the blind prophet who had known truth even in life. The old man's ghost finally appeared, demanding blood. Tiresias drank and spoke. "Your journey is cursed by Poseidon for blinding his son. But you may yet reach home, if you leave the cattle of the sun god untouched. Take one, and all your men die." Other ghosts came to drink. Odysseus saw his mother. He had not known she'd died. She had grieved herself to death waiting for him. They could not embrace. His arms passed through her. Achilles came, greatest of warriors. "Better to be a living slave," the hero said, "than king of all the dead." Even glory faded in the colorless underworld. Life was everything. Dawn found Odysseus rowing hard away from that gray shore. Tiresias's warning burned into his memory. Leave the cattle of the sun god untouched. Simple. He had only to obey. Back to Circe's island they sailed, carrying the weight of the underworld. The witch was waiting on the shore, knowing somehow that they had returned from death itself. That night, while the crew feasted and tried to forget the gray faces of the dead, Circe took Odysseus aside. "I will tell you what waits ahead. Listen carefully or you will not survive." First, the sirens, creatures whose voices could make any man forget his own name. Their island was carpeted with the bones of sailors who'd steered toward their song and never steered away. "Plug your men's ears with beeswax," Circe instructed. "They must not hear a single note. But you, Odysseus, if you want to hear the sirens and live, have your men bind you to the mast." Beyond the sirens lay a choice between two horrors. A narrow strait with death on both sides. No ship had ever passed without losing something precious. On one side, Charybdis, a whirlpool that swallowed the sea itself 3 times each day. Ships, whales, anything that swam too close was dragged down into the churning darkness. On the other side, Scylla, a monster with 6 heads on long necks, each mouth filled with triple rows of teeth. She lived in a cave high on the cliff, snatching sailors as ships passed below. "Sail closer to Scylla," Circe advised. "Charybdis will take your whole ship. Scylla will only take 6 men, 1 for each head. That is the better loss." Accepted. Finally, the island of Thrinacia, where the sun god Helios kept his sacred cattle. Golden beasts that never died, never aged, never could be replaced. Do not touch them, Circe warned.
Swear it.
Odysseus remembered Tiresias's prophecy, the same warning. Touch the cattle and all his men would die. He would return home alone, after many years, to find his house filled with trouble. Dawn came too soon. Odysseus gathered his men and told them only about the sirens and the strait. He did not mention the cattle. Some fates are better not spoken aloud. Circe watched them sail away, her hand raised in farewell, or warning. The wind she sent was gentle and true. For now, the gods were kind. It would not last. The wind died suddenly. The sea went flat as polished bronze. In the distance, Odysseus heard it. Music so beautiful that his hands moved toward the tiller without his will. "No," Odysseus commanded. His men sealed their ears with beeswax, pressing it deep until they could hear nothing but the rush of their own blood. Then they bound their captain to the mast. The Sirens' Island emerged from the haze, 2 figures on the rocks, more beautiful than any mortal woman. Their mouths opened, and Odysseus understood why men died for this sound. They sang to him by name. "Odysseus, hero of Troy, pride of the Greeks, stop and listen. We know everything. We can tell you all the secrets of the world, all the answers you seek." Odysseus screamed at his men to untie him, to turn the ship. His voice cracked with desperate pleading. But they could not hear. They only rowed harder, as he had instructed. 2 sailors came and bound him tighter, just as he'd ordered them to do if he begged. The ropes bit into his flesh. The siren's song faded behind them. He had survived barely. When the song could no longer be heard, the crew unplugged their ears and cut Odysseus free. He slumped against the mast, trembling. "I understand now," he whispered, "why sailors never return." There was no time to recover. The water ahead began to churn. Twin walls of rock rose on either side. The strait Circe had warned about. The crew saw the spray from Charybdis and went pale. Odysseus ordered them to steer toward the opposite cliff, toward Scylla. He did not tell them what waited there. Some sacrifices cannot be explained, they can only be endured. Charybdis gave them a view of her horror as they passed. The entire sea was being sucked down into a spinning void. The seabed visible, fish and debris swirling into oblivion. While every eye watched Charybdis, Scylla struck. 6 heads on serpentine necks shot down from the cliff above. 6 men were snatched from the deck in a single heartbeat. Odysseus watched his men rise toward the cave, kicking and screaming, calling his name for help. He could do nothing. Circe had told him 6 men, or everyone. He had made his choice. The screams from the cave lasted only seconds. The ship emerged from the strait, intact but diminished. 6 more men who would never see Ithaca, 6 more ghosts for Odysseus to carry. Ahead, an island blazed with light, not natural light, but the glow of the sun god himself. Helios's sacred island, where his immortal cattle grazed, the place they must not stop. "Row past," Odysseus commanded. "We must not land here." But his men were broken, traumatized, starving, exhausted. They needed rest. They begged for just one night on solid ground. Eurylochus spoke for them all. "Captain, the men are dying on their feet. One night? We'll take what food we have and touch nothing on this island. Swear us to it, but let us rest." Against his judgment, Odysseus agreed. He made every man swear a sacred oath. Whatever they found on this island, they would not touch. The cattle of the sun were not to be harmed. They beached the ship and made camp far from the grazing cattle. The golden beasts watched them with knowing eyes. Immortal animals who had seen many hungry sailors come and go. That night the winds changed. A storm rolled in from the sea and stayed. Day after day, week after week, the Greeks were trapped on the island, their food dwindling to nothing. A month passed. The ship's stores were empty. The men caught birds and fish when they could, but it was never enough. They grew gaunt, their eyes following the cattle constantly. Odysseus walked inland to pray, begging any god for help. When he had finished praying, exhaustion overcame him. He fell into a deep sleep, a sleep that would cost him everything. While he slept, Eurylochus spoke to the starving men. "We are going to die here anyway. Is it better to starve than to eat well and face the gods' anger? At least we'd die with full bellies." They slaughtered the finest cattle. They built great fires and roasted the sacred meat. When Odysseus woke and smelled the smoke, his heart stopped. He knew, he already knew. He ran down the hillside screaming, but it was too late. His men sat around their fires, eating the sacred flesh, the cattle's hides twitching on the ground, bellowing even in death. High above, Helios saw everything. The sun god's rage blazed across the sky. He demanded Zeus punish the men who had eaten his cattle, or he would take his light to the underworld forever. Zeus agreed. He promised that when Odysseus's ship next touched open water, his thunderbolt would find it. The sun god was satisfied. The storm over Thrinacia finally broke. The men celebrated the good weather, ignorant of what it meant. Odysseus alone saw the trap, the calm before the final storm. He could warn them, but what would it change? They had already damned themselves. They launched with hope for the first time in weeks. The shore of Thrinacia fell away behind them. Open water spread ahead, blue and welcoming. Then the sky began to darken. The storm Zeus sent was not natural. It was divine fury compressed into wind and wave. The west wind screamed, then reversed into an eastern gale. The mast snapped like a twig. Then the thunderbolt came. Zeus's personal weapon split the ship in half. Fire and lightning consumed the wood. Men flew into the churning sea, screaming prayers no god would answer. One by one, the men drowned. Odysseus clung to the broken mast and keel, lashing them together into a makeshift raft. Around him, the sea swallowed his last companions. The storm drove him backward, back toward the strait, back toward Charybdis. When dawn came, he saw the whirlpool ahead, sucking down everything in its path. His raft was being pulled in. Above the whirlpool grew a wild fig tree, its roots gripping the cliff face. As the raft was sucked down, Odysseus leaped and caught a branch. He hung there while Charybdis devoured his raft. Hours he hung there, arms burning, waiting. 3 times a day Charybdis swallowed the sea, and 3 times she vomited it back up. He waited for the third belching of the waters. When the mast and keel rose to the surface, he let go. The fall seemed endless. He hit the water and pulled himself onto the wreckage, paddling desperately away before the whirlpool could inhale again. 9 days he drifted, alone on the sea that had killed everyone he knew. No food, no water, only the sun and the stars and the endless rocking of the waves. On the 10th night, the current carried him to a shore soft with sand and sweet with flowers. Hands lifted him from the wreckage. A woman's voice spoke comfort. He had reached Aegia, Calypso's island. The ancient Greeks believed in fate, not as punishment, but as the shape of a life. Even the gods could not change what the fates had woven. They could only delay or ease the pattern. Tiresias saw the pattern of Odysseus's fate in the underworld. The prophet didn't create the future. He simply read what was already woven. Warning Odysseus didn't change destiny, it was part of it. This might seem hopeless to us, but to the Greeks it was strangely comforting. Your suffering had meaning. Your struggles fit a pattern. The gods had not forgotten you, they had woven you. Odysseus's men ate the sacred cattle, because that was their fate. Odysseus survived because that was his. We rage against unfairness, but the Greeks asked a different question. What is my thread's purpose? Tonight, as you drift toward sleep, consider maybe your journey has a shape too. Maybe the delays and the dangers are woven in, not to punish you, but to make the homecoming mean something. Calypso's island was paradise. Fruit trees heavy with sweetness, springs of crystal water, caves hung with vines. The nymph loved Odysseus. She wanted him to stay forever. She offered him immortality. He could live forever with her in paradise, never aging, never dying, free from the dangers that had killed everyone he loved. All he had to do was forget Ithaca. Odysseus refused. Not once, but every day for 7 years. He chose mortality, chose his aging wife over an immortal goddess, chose a rocky island over eternal paradise. Every evening, He walked to the shore and sat watching the horizon. The nymph found him there each sunset, weeping toward the home he could not reach. 7 years of tears. He stayed in her bed at night. What choice did he have? But his heart never stayed with him. It sailed across the sea each evening to a woman who was growing old alone. On Olympus, Athena saw her favorite hero's imprisonment. She went to Zeus when Poseidon was away feasting. "Father, let Odysseus go. His suffering has been payment enough." Zeus agreed. He sent Hermes to Ogygia with a command even a nymph must obey: release Odysseus. Let him build a raft and sail. Let him finally go home. Calypso raged against the unfairness. Gods could take mortal lovers whenever they wished, but goddesses were always forced to give theirs up. Still, she had no choice. She told Odysseus he was free. He didn't quite believe it. After 7 years, was it a trick? But Calypso swore by the river Styx, the oath even gods cannot break. She would help him build a raft and let him go. 4 days Odysseus worked, cutting trees, shaping planks, weaving sails. Calypso brought him tools and food, helping even as her heart broke. On the 5th day the raft was ready. She filled his raft with bread and wine, gave him clothing and detailed directions. Their goodbye was gentle. She had loved him truly. He had never been able to love her back. 17 days of fair sailing brought him near land. Phaeacia, an island of seafarers. Ithaca was only a day's voyage beyond. Home was close enough to taste on the salt air. Then Poseidon returned from his feasting. He saw the raft, saw who sailed it, and remembered his blinded son. The sea god had one last storm to give his enemy. The storm that struck was the worst yet, Poseidon's personal fury made manifest. Waves towered like mountains. The raft came apart board by board. Odysseus was swept into the churning darkness. A sea goddess watched. Ino, who had once been mortal herself. She felt pity for this man who would not stop trying to get home. She rose from the waves and offered her veil. "Wrap this around your chest and swim. It will not let you drown. When you reach land, throw it back into the sea." Odysseus took the veil and dove beneath the drowning waves. 2 days and 2 nights he swam. Poseidon's storm could not kill him while he wore the veil, but it could exhaust him, batter him, drive him away from any safe landing. When he finally reached Phaeacia's coast, he found only cliffs and rocks, the waves smashing him against stone, then dragging him back to smash again. His skin tore, his bones cracked. Athena guided him to a river mouth, where the rocks gave way to sand. With his last strength, he swam into the calm waters and crawled onto the beach. He kissed the earth. He had survived. He threw Ino's veil back into the sea, as she had instructed. Then he crawled into a grove of olive trees, buried himself in fallen leaves for warmth, and let Athena wrap him in deep, healing sleep. Morning brought voices. Young women laughing, playing with a ball by the river. They were doing laundry, the Princess Nausicaa and her handmaidens, enjoying the sunshine near where a stranger slept. Athena had arranged this meeting. She whispered in Nausicaa's ear during the night, "Go to the river, wash the linens, and there you will find something important for your future." The ball bounced wrong and landed in Odysseus's shelter of leaves. He woke to screaming. The girls fleeing from the wild man emerging from the brush, naked, crusted with salt and blood. Only Nausicaa stayed. Athena gave her courage, and something in the stranger's eyes told her he meant no harm. Odysseus kept his distance and spoke the most beautiful speech of his life. "Are you a goddess or a mortal?" he asked. "If mortal, your parents must be the happiest people alive, and whoever wins your hand will be more blessed than any king." Flattery that was also truth. She gave him clothes, led him toward the city, and told him how to approach her parents. "Fall before my mother's knees," she advised. "She has the true power. Win her, and you win passage home." The palace of King Alcinous was magnificent. Bronze walls, golden doors, gardens where fruit grew in every season. Odysseus entered like a shadow, invisible in mist that Athena wrapped around him. The mist lifted as he reached Queen Arete. He fell at her feet and begged for help to get home. The court gasped at the stranger who had appeared from nowhere. The king rose immediately. King Alcinous welcomed him. The Phaeacians were famous for their hospitality, the very virtue Polyphemus had violated. Here, no questions were asked. First, the stranger would eat. Then he could tell his story. That night, a blind bard sang to entertain the court. He sang of the Trojan War, of Odysseus' cunning, of the wooden horse. The stranger wept into his cloak, hiding his tears from the crowd. Alcinous noticed the stranger's tears. "Who are you?" he asked gently. "What tragedy binds you so tightly to that song? Tell us your name, your land, your sorrows." Odysseus lowered his cloak. "I am Odysseus," he said, "son of Laertes, king of Ithaca. The song you heard, I lived it. For 20 years I have been trying to get home." And then he told them everything. From Troy to the Seacones, from the Cyclops to Circe, from the underworld to Calypso's island. The court listened until dawn, spellbound by every word. King Alcinous vowed to help him. The Phaeacians had the fastest ships on any sea, magical vessels that needed no steering, that knew the way to any destination their passengers desired. They loaded the ship with treasures, bronze and gold and woven garments. Odysseus would arrive home richer than he had left. The gods' punishments would end with the gods' gifts. At dusk, Odysseus boarded the Phaeacian ship. He lay down on the deck as they instructed, and sleep took him, the deep sleep of a man who has finally stopped fighting. The ship knew the way. The Phaeacian ship moved faster than thought, crossing in one night what would take mortal vessels weeks. While Odysseus dreamed, the shores of Ithaca drew near for the first time in 20 years. The Phaeacian crew carried him still sleeping onto the beach. They laid the treasure beside him and departed. When dawn came, Odysseus woke alone on sand that smelled of home. But he didn't recognize it. Athena had wrapped the island in mist. He wept, thinking the Phaeacians had tricked him, left him on yet another foreign shore. Then a young shepherd approached. The shepherd was Athena in disguise. She laughed when Odysseus spun a clever lie about who he was. "I see you cannot stop lying even when you don't have to. I've missed you, Odysseus." She cleared the mist. There was his harbor. There was his cave where nymphs were worshipped. There was his island, his kingdom, his home. Odysseus fell to his knees and kissed the soil of Ithaca. 20 years away. And Odysseus could not simply walk through his own front door. His palace crawled with enemies who had declared him dead. 100 suitors waited inside, armed and dangerous. Athena explained what had happened. For 3 years, over 100 noble suitors had occupied his home, eating his food, drinking his wine, pressuring his wife to choose one of them as husband. Penelope had resisted with all her cunning. The shroud trick, endless delays, promises never quite kept. But the suitors' patience was ending. They had begun to plot against Telemachus's life. Odysseus's blood burned for immediate vengeance. 1 man against 100, but Athena cautioned patience. Surprise and strategy would serve better than fury. They needed a plan. First, disguise. Athena touched Odysseus with her divine power. His skin wrinkled, his hair turned white and thin, his strong back bent. In moments, a vigorous king became a feeble beggar. His fine clothes became rags. His keen eyes grew rheumy. Even his voice changed, quavering where it once commanded. No one would recognize the king of Ithaca in this wretched form. Athena would bring Telemachus home from his voyage. She had sent him to seek news of his father. When son met disguised father. Together they would plan the suitor's doom. For now, Odysseus would go to the swineherd Eumaeus, a faithful servant who had served the family since before Odysseus was born. The old man's loyalty had never wavered. Odysseus hobbled up the mountain path in his beggar's disguise. Dogs rushed out to attack him, but Eumaeus called them off and invited the stranger in, hospitality even in poverty. The swineherd's hut was poor but warm. Eumaeus offered food and fire to the stranger, lamenting as he served that his true master had never returned from Troy. Odysseus was the best of masters, Eumaeus said, wiping his eyes. He would have freed me, given me land of my own. Now those suitors devour everything he built while his wife weeps. Odysseus longed to reveal himself, to embrace this faithful man, but not yet. The disguise had to hold until every piece was in place. He swallowed his emotion and spun a false tale of who he was. Days passed in the swineherd's hut. Then one morning, the dogs that had attacked Odysseus suddenly wagged their tails at an approaching figure. Eumaeus looked up with joy. Telemachus had returned. The young man embraced Eumaeus like family, because the old servant was the closest thing to family he'd had while growing up without a father. Telemachus barely glanced at the beggar in the corner. Eumaeus rushed to the palace to tell Penelope her son had returned safely. For a moment father and son were alone. Odysseus's hands trembled. The moment had come. Athena appeared at the doorway, invisible to Telemachus. She nodded to Odysseus. It was time. She touched him, and the beggar's disguise fell away. The king of Ithaca stood revealed. Telemachus scrambled backward, terrified. Only gods could transform like that. Was this some deity come to test him? "I am no god," Odysseus said, voice thick with emotion. "I am your father." "No man has another father," Telemachus whispered. "Odysseus is my father, and he is dead or lost forever. You must be a god wearing his form to torture me." "No other Odysseus will ever come home," his father said. "Only this one, broken, delayed, guilty of being away too long. But home nonetheless. Will you not know your own father?" Something broke in Telemachus. He rushed forward and threw his arms around his father. Both men wept. 20 years of separation flooding out in a single embrace. They cried until their voices failed. Then they sat together, and Odysseus explained everything. The journey, the losses, and now, the plan. The suitors would die, all of them. "How can 2 of us kill 100? Telemachus asked. Odysseus smiled grimly. "We'll have Athena on our side, and surprise, and 20 years of rage. Count no man until he's dead." The plan was simple. Telemachus would return to the palace openly. Odysseus would follow as a beggar, suffering the suitors' abuse to get inside. When the moment came, they would strike together. Telemachus must tell no one, not even Penelope. His mother's joy might give away the secret. Only when blood stained the hall would she learn her husband had returned. One more task. Telemachus would remove all weapons from the great hall except 2 swords and 2 spears hidden nearby. The suitors would have nothing when the trap was sprung. At dawn, Telemachus departed for the palace. Odysseus watched his son walk away, tall, brave, carrying the secret that would restore their house or destroy them both. Hours later, Odysseus began his own walk to the palace. Eumaeus guided him, not knowing he led his master home. The palace gates loomed ahead, the final threshold. By the gates lay an old dog on a dung heap, skeletal, flea-bitten, barely alive. 20 years ago Odysseus had raised him from a pup. The dog's name was Argos. The dog lifted his head. His tail wagged weakly. After 20 years Argos still knew his master's step, his master's scent. He had waited all this time to see Odysseus one last time. Odysseus wiped his eyes quickly, hiding tears from Eumaeus. He could not go to Argos, could not pet him. That would give everything away. He walked on. Behind him Argos lowered his head and died, content. Odysseus the beggar entered his own palace for the first time in 20 years. The great hall echoed with the laughter of men who had claimed his home, his food, his wine. He went from suitor to suitor, begging scraps. Most tossed him bread carelessly. But Antinous, the cruelest of them all, looked at the beggar with contempt. "Get out, old filth," Antinous sneered. He grabbed a footstool and hurled it at Odysseus, striking his shoulder. The blow staggered the disguised king. The hall fell silent, watching. Odysseus said nothing. He absorbed the insult, stored it away with all the others. Soon Antinous would die first for that stool. But not yet. The time was not yet right. Word reached Penelope that a stranger had come begging, and had been struck by Antinous. She sent for the beggar. Perhaps he had news of Odysseus. Strangers sometimes carried word from far lands. Odysseus asked to wait until nightfall. The suitors would be drunk and easier to avoid. When darkness came, He was led to the queen's chambers. His heart hammered as he approached his wife. Penelope sat by the fire, more beautiful in her grief than any goddess. 20 years had touched her with silver hair and deeper eyes, but to Odysseus, she was everything he remembered and more. She asked about his travels. Had he heard news of Odysseus? He lied beautifully, telling her that he had met her husband, that Odysseus was alive and would return soon. Penelope wept with fragile hope. The queen ordered a servant to wash the beggar's feet, a mark of hospitality. The old nurse Euryclea came with basin and water. She had raised Odysseus from infancy. She knew every inch of him. As she lifted his foot, her fingers found a scar, the mark of a boar's tusk from his youth. Her hands froze. She looked up at his face with wild eyes. She knew. Odysseus's hand shot out and covered her mouth. "Yes," he whispered fiercely. "It's me. But speak one word and you will destroy us all. Silence, mother. Silence until it's done." The old nurse finished washing his feet, trembling with joy and terror. Penelope noticed nothing, lost in her own thoughts. One more person knew, but the secret held. Before he left, Penelope told him her decision. Tomorrow she would announce a contest. Whoever could string Odysseus's great bow and shoot an arrow through 12 acts, heads would become her husband. Odysseus nearly laughed. Only he had ever strung that bow. The contest would put his weapon in his hands at the perfect moment. Whether Penelope knew or guessed, she had given him his chance. That night, Odysseus slept in the hall among the servants. But he did not really sleep. He watched the suitors stumble to their beds, counting them, memorizing positions, planning angles of attack. Athena came to him in the darkness, invisible to all others. "Tomorrow," she whispered, "I will be with you. Sleep now and gather strength. Tomorrow you take back everything." Morning came golden and terrible. The suitors gathered in the hall, laughing about the contest. None of them doubted they could string the bow. They were young, strong, confident in their right to win. Penelope descended with the great bow, a gift to Odysseus from a friend, unstrung for 20 years. She set 12 acts, heads in a row, their rings perfectly aligned. The contest was ready. Telemachus tried first. 3 times he nearly bent the bow to stringing, but each time he stopped, catching his father's warning look. The contest must proceed through the suitors first. One by one, the suitors tried. One by one they failed. The great bow would not bend for them. They rubbed it with fat, warmed it by fire. Nothing helped. Their confidence turned to frustration. Antinous watched the failures and suggested they postpone. Try again after sacrificing to Apollo, the archer god. He sensed something wrong. He wanted to delay, though he didn't know why. Odysseus stepped forward. "Let me try," the beggar said. "I was once strong. Let me see if any power remains in these old arms." The suitors erupted in mocking laughter. Antinous raged. How dare a beggar ask to compete for the queen? But Penelope silenced him. "Give him the bow. If he strings it, I won't marry him. But I'll give him clothes and a sword." Telemachus sent his mother away. "Go to your chambers. The bow is men's business now." Penelope left, puzzled but obedient. She would not see what came next. That was mercy. The faithful swineherd Eumaeus brought the bow to Odysseus. Telemachus ordered the hall doors barred from outside. The suitors barely noticed. Their eyes were fixed on the beggar and the bow. Odysseus took the bow. He turned it over in his hands, examining it for damage, testing the wood. 20 years since he had held this weapon. It knew his grip. The suitors watched with contempt as the old beggar handled the weapon. "Look at him," one sneered. "Playing with it like he knows what a bow is." In a moment, they would learn. Odysseus set the bow's curve against his knee. His hands moved from long memory. With one smooth motion, as easily as a musician strings a lyre, he bent the great bow and slipped the string into place. Silence crashed across the hall. Every suitor's face drained of color. No one had moved that fast, that easily. No one had made it look so simple. Who was this beggar? Odysseus selected an arrow from the quiver at his feet. He notched it, drew back the string, and aimed through the 12 acts, Heads. The shot that none of them could have made. The arrow sang. It passed through all 12 rings without touching metal and buried itself in the far wall. Perfect. Impossible. And then Odysseus rose to his full height. "The contest is over," he said, his voice no longer quavering. "No, a target no man will miss." He notched another arrow and aimed it at Antinous, who still held his wine cup. Antinous had time for one thought. This cannot be happening. Before the arrow took him through the throat. Wine and blood poured from his mouth together. The first suitor fell. Chaos erupted. The suitors leaped up, reaching for swords that weren't there. Telemachus had removed them all. They looked to the doors, barred. They were trapped with the man they had wronged. "You thought I would never return," Odysseus said, notching another arrow. "You ate my food, harassed my wife, plotted against my son. Now you will pay." Single one. Telemachus appeared at his father's side with the hidden weapons. 2 swords, 2 spears. The faithful servants Eumaeus and another joined them. 4 men against 100. The slaughter began. Arrow after arrow flew from Odysseus's bow. Each one found a throat, an eye, a heart. No suitor was fast enough to dodge, strong enough to survive. The man who had fought at Troy was home. When the arrows ran out, the real fighting began. Swords and spears against desperate men grabbing tables and chairs. Athena watched unseen, turning aside blows meant for Odysseus, guiding his strikes true. The floor grew slick with blood. The moaning of the wounded mixed with the crash of furniture. Telemachus fought like the son of a hero. He had never killed before today, but he learned fast. For centuries, no one wrote this story down. It lived only in the mouths of bards who traveled from hall to hall, singing for their supper the tale of Odysseus's long way home. Each bard added something, forgot something, changed something. The Cyclops might grow larger in one telling, Penelope more clever in another. The story was alive and living things change. Perhaps one man, perhaps many, perhaps a name for a tradition. Around 750 BCE, someone gathered the threads and wove them into the tapestry we still read today. Every generation since has found themselves in this story. Romans read it while building their empire. Medieval monks copied it by candlelight. Renaissance princes learned Greek just to read the original words. Tonight, you hear it too. The same story, changed again, spoken into the darkness as it was always meant to be. 3,000 years, and still Odysseus sails toward home. Back in the blood-soaked hall, Eurymachus, second of the suitors, tried to bargain.
Antinous was the worst of us! He led us astray!
"We'll pay you back for everything, cattle, wine, gold." Odysseus's answer was an arrow through Eurymachus's chest. "The price," he said, "was not measured in gold." The bargaining was over. There would be no mercy. There would only be justice. Some suitors charged in desperation, preferring to die fighting than cowering. They fell. Some hid behind pillars, trying to become invisible. Odysseus found them all. One suitor reached a door to the armory. Somehow unlocked. He emerged with swords for himself and others. The balance shifted, but Odysseus saw Telemachus's stricken face and understood his son's mistake. "No time for blame," Odysseus said. "Fight." And fight they did, 4 men against armed dozens now. The combat became savage, close, desperate. Blood flew with every swing. Athena appeared then, no longer hidden. She raised her divine shield, the Aegis, and the suitors' courage shattered like dropped pottery. They scattered screaming, cutting at shadows, falling over each other. Odysseus and his 3 allies moved through the panicked mob like wolves through sheep. The fight became a harvest. Every swing dropped another body. The hall echoed with the sound of justice. One by one, the suitors fell. The bard who had sung for them begged for mercy. He had only performed for his supper. Telemachus spoke for him, and Odysseus spared the musician. The herald who had served the suitors under duress was also spared. But the serving maids who had slept with suitors, who had mocked Penelope, them Odysseus ordered hanged. When the last suitor breathed his last, Odysseus stood in the center of his hall. Blood soaked his rags. Bodies lay in heaps. He had taken back his home. Now came the harder part. He ordered the hall cleaned, the bodies removed, the blood washed away, sulfur burned to purify the air. Only then would he let them call Penelope. Only when the horror was hidden. Euryclea climbed the stairs to Penelope's chamber, barely able to contain her joy.
"Quick, my lady! Your husband has returned! The suitors are dead!"
Odysseus is home.
Penelope came down the stairs slowly, her heart refusing to hope. Too many strangers had claimed to bring news of Odysseus. Too many times she had believed and been disappointed. Odysseus had washed and dressed in fine clothes. Athena made him taller, more handsome, his gray hair touched with divine light. He looked like the king he was. Penelope sat and stared at him. Telemachus was frustrated. "Mother, why do you just sit there? That's father, embrace him." But Penelope shook her head. "If this is truly Odysseus, there are things only we two would know." Odysseus smiled grimly. He understood. 20 years of fighting off clever suitors had made his wife as cautious as he was. She needed proof. He would give it. "Let the stranger sleep elsewhere tonight." Penelope said to Euryclea, "Move the bed from our chamber, the one Odysseus made, and make it comfortable for him." Odysseus leaped to his feet. "Move the bed? Who could move that bed?"
"I built it myself around the trunk of a living olive tree."
"The tree is one of the bedposts."
"The room was built around it."
Penelope's careful control shattered. No one else knew about the bed. No one could have told him. This was Odysseus, truly, finally, impossibly home. She rose with tears streaming. She ran to him. He caught her. 20 years of separation ended in one embrace. Husband and wife, king and queen, two halves of one whole finally rejoined. They stood that way for what felt like hours, neither willing to break the embrace, neither quite believing the other was real. The servants wept. Telemachus watched with wonder. Home had been restored. That night, in their bedroom built around the living olive tree, Odysseus and Penelope shared their stories. His wanderings, her resistance, the gods who helped and hindered. They talked until dawn. She told him of the shroud trick, 3 years weaving by day, unweaving by night, until a maid betrayed her. He told her of Polyphemus, of Circe, of the dead who spoke true prophecy. Athena held back the dawn for them, stretching the night so they could finish their stories. Even the gods respected this reunion. Some homecomings deserve more time than the sun allows. But the story wasn't quite finished. Odysseus still had one more task. Tiresias had prophesied it in the underworld. He would have to leave again, though not for long, not for years. He must walk inland carrying an oar until he found people who didn't know what an oar was, who had never seen the sea. There he would plant it and sacrifice to Poseidon. Only then would the god forgive him. And then, he told her, Tiresias said I would live to a gentle old age. Death will come to me from the sea, but gently, peacefully, when I am ready. That was his promise. But that was for another day. Tonight, the king of Ithaca slept in his own bed for the first time in 20 years, his wife beside him, his son safe in the next room, his home restored. When morning finally came, Odysseus had one more reunion. With his father Laertes, who had lived in grief on his farm since his son sailed for Troy. 20 years of thinking his child dead. The old man was digging in his orchard, dressed in rags, grieving still. Odysseus, unable to resist one last test, approached as a stranger and asked about the trees. But when Laertes spoke of his lost son with tears streaming, Odysseus could bear no more deception. He revealed himself, showing the scar, naming every tree his father had given him as a boy. Laertes nearly fainted from joy. His son, alive home, victorious. The old man embraced Odysseus with what strength remained in his arms, and both wept among the trees that remembered. News of the slaughter had spread. The families of the dead suitors gathered with weapons, demanding blood for blood. Odysseus had killed their sons. Now they would kill him. Battle nearly came, the cycle of revenge ready to spin forever. But Athena descended between the armies, and Zeus hurled a thunderbolt before her feet. Enough, the gods commanded. Peace now or face divine wrath. The families of the suitors retreated. Peace was sworn. The blood feud that could have lasted generations ended in a single divine moment. Ithaca was whole again. The word Odyssey itself comes from this story. When we speak of a long, difficult journey, any journey, we're invoking Odysseus without knowing it. His name became the name for every struggle home. Every homecoming story since owes something to this one. Dante sent Odysseus beyond the edge of the world. Tennyson had him sail into the sunset one last time. Joyce set him in Dublin for a single day. We keep telling this story because we keep living it. Every soldier coming home from war is Odysseus. Every traveler missing their family is Odysseus. Everyone changed by what they've survived is Odysseus. The monsters we face may not be cyclopes or sirens. But we all face temptations that could make us forget who we are. We all face obstacles that seem impossible. We all just want to get home. Tonight, as you drift toward sleep, you too are making a journey. From waking to rest, from day to night, from noise to silence. May your voyage be gentle. May you arrive safely. Odysseus ruled Ithaca in peace after that. The kingdom he had nearly lost became the kingdom he rebuilt. The people who had thought him dead learned what their king truly was. He made the journey inland, as Tiresias had commanded. He walked with his oar until a farmer asked why he carried a winnowing fan. There, he planted it and sacrificed to Poseidon. Poseidon accepted the offering. The god's anger faded at last. The blinding of Polyphemus forgiven, the 10 years of torment concluded. Odysseus could sail again without fear. Years passed. Telemachus grew into a man worthy of his father. Penelope's hair went fully silver, and still she was beautiful. They grew old together, as they should have from the beginning. Sometimes Odysseus would stand at the harbor and watch the ships sail out. He remembered every wave of his journey, every lost companion, every miracle that brought him home. He had learned what mattered. Not glory, not treasure, not even cunning. What mattered was home, the people who waited, the bed built around a living tree, the soil that knew your name. When death finally came, gently from the sea as Tiresias had promised, Odysseus was ready. He had told his story to anyone who would listen. The journey was complete. They buried him looking out to sea, the element that had been both his enemy and his road. Penelope outlived him only briefly. Some say the gods reunited them in the fields of Elysium. Telemachus became king after his father. He ruled well, telling the stories of Odysseus's wanderings to his own children, keeping the memory alive, and so the story passed to new voices. Those children told their children. Bards shaped the tales into songs. And 3,000 years later, here we are, still telling the story of a man who just wanted to get home. The Odyssey never really ends. Every time someone tells it, Odysseus sails again. Every time someone listens, the wine dark sea stretches out once more. The story breathes because we breathe it. What is home? Odysseus could have stayed with Calypso forever, immortal, comfortable, loved. He chose mortality. He chose a rocky island and an aging wife and a life that would end. Home is where we are known, truly known, scars and all. Where an old nurse recognizes us by touch. Where a dying dog wags his tail one last time. Where our bed is rooted in living wood. We all have our cyclopes, obstacles that seem impossible, our sirens, temptations that could make us forget ourselves, our storms, chaos that throws us off course, but we can survive them. We can survive them because we have somewhere to go. The destination makes the journey bearable. The home we carry in our hearts guides us through the darkest seas. And when we finally arrive, changed, scarred, older, wiser, we find that home has been waiting. It recognized us when we couldn't recognize it. That's the story. That's the Odyssey. That's what it means to come home. Every trial Odysseus faced held a meaning beneath its surface. The Greeks who shaped this story filled it with symbols. Warnings and wisdom dressed in the clothes of adventure. The lotus eaters offered forgetfulness. The temptation to simply stop caring, to let go of everything that drives us forward. Sometimes the sweetest trap is the one that asks nothing of us. Polyphemus embodied brute strength without civilization. The Cyclopes had no laws, no assemblies, no ships. Odysseus defeated him not with muscle but with wit. The victory of culture over chaos. But Odysseus's pride nearly undid that victory. Shouting his name to Polyphemus brought Poseidon's wrath. Cunning means nothing if we cannot resist the urge to boast about it. The bag of winds taught another hard lesson. Odysseus's men opened it from greed and suspicion. We often destroy our own chances of success, sometimes when we're closest to achieving our goals. Circe transformed men into pigs, but is that really a transformation? The suitors who wallowed in Odysseus's home were already swine in spirit. The outer sometimes reveals the inner truth. The sirens sang of knowledge. They promised to tell Odysseus everything, all secrets revealed. But some knowledge costs too much. Some truths destroy the seeker. Wisdom is knowing what not to pursue. Scylla and Charybdis offered no good choice. Only the selection of which evil was smaller. Leaders often face this. Sometimes the best we can do is lose less. That too is a kind of victory. The cattle of the sun represented the sacred. Things that must not be touched regardless of need. The crew's hunger was real, but some lines cannot be crossed. Desperation does not excuse desecration. Calypso offered paradise without purpose. Immortality without Ithaca. Odysseus chose a mortal life with meaning over an eternal life without it. Some gifts are prisons beautifully disguised. Penelope deserves her own understanding. She fought the same battle Odysseus did, against forces trying to claim what was hers, using the only weapons available: patience, cunning, endurance. Her shroud trick matched Odysseus's. Nobody. Trick. Both used language and time as weapons. They were equals in cleverness. That's why their reunion feels earned. Two halves of the same mind finding each other again. The bed built around the olive tree. That was their secret, their proof. A marriage rooted in something living, growing from the earth itself. Roots that could not be cut or moved. Argos the dog waited 20 years to see his master one last time. Loyalty doesn't require words or understanding. Sometimes love is simply staying, simply waiting, simply not giving up. The slaughter of the suitors troubles modern readers. But the Greeks understood hospitality was sacred law. The suitors hadn't just been rude, they had violated the cosmic order. Their deaths restored balance. Athena stopped the cycle of revenge that could have followed. Without divine intervention, Odysseus would have fought the suitors' families, who would have fought back, on and on forever. Some chains must be broken by force beyond human will. Why does this story still matter? Because we still face the same challenges in different forms. We still forget what matters when things get too comfortable. We still boast when we should stay silent. We still choose the lesser evil when there is no good choice. We still hunger for things we shouldn't take. We still must choose between paradise without purpose and purpose without paradise. Most of all, we still need to get home. Wherever home is for us. A place, a person, a feeling of belonging. We spend our lives trying to reach it. The journey is the same, only the seas change. That's why, 3,000 years later, we still tell this story to help people sleep. Because it ends with homecoming. Because even the longest journey can end in your own bed, safe at last. The Odyssey didn't stay in ancient Greece. It sailed outward through history, touching every culture it reached, inspiring stories that would have amazed even Homer. The Romans claimed Odysseus, or Ulysses, as they called him, as the ancestor of their founders. Virgil's Aeneid was written as a response to Homer, a Roman Odyssey for a Roman Empire. Dante placed Odysseus in the Inferno, but not for his tricks or lies. For him, Odysseus's sin was sailing past the Pillars of Hercules, pursuing knowledge beyond mortal limits. Even punishment was a kind of honor. Tennyson wrote of an aging Ulysses, bored with peaceful Ithaca, yearning to sail again. To strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield. The homecoming became a new departure. James Joyce set the whole story in a single day in Dublin. His Leopold Bloom was an ordinary man making an ordinary journey home. But Joyce proved that every journey, however small, is an Odyssey. Hollywood found Odysseus too. The Coen brothers, "O brother, where art thou?" sent him through Depression-era Mississippi. The Cyclops became a one-eyed Bible salesman. The sirens sang on a riverbank. Science borrowed from the myth as well. NASA named its moon program Apollo. But every astronaut who looked back at Earth and ached for home was living the Odyssey in reverse, trying to return from the stars. The word Odyssey itself passed into common speech. Any long, difficult journey became an Odyssey. Any sequence of wandering, any epic struggle. Odysseus gave his name to the entire concept of meaningful travel. Psychologists found Odysseus in the human mind. The journey home became a metaphor for the search for self. The monsters inside us, the temptations we face, the identity we're trying to remember. And tonight, here in the darkness, the story continues. You've carried Odysseus through monsters and goddesses, storms and slaughter. Now, like him, you deserve rest. Home is waiting. The wine, dark sea grows calm now. The waves that tossed Odysseus for so long have finally settled. The harbor is in sight. Your own harbor is in sight. The stars that guided ancient sailors guide you too. Not toward any island, but toward the quiet shores of sleep. The same stars. The same peace they promised. Odysseus's ship is beached for the night. The sail is furled, the oars are shipped, the anchor stone rests on the sand. All the journeying is done for now. On Ithaca, the olive trees sway gently in the evening breeze. Their silver leaves catch the last light. These trees watched Odysseus grow up. Now they welcome him home. The palace hearth still glows with embers. Warm light fills the hall where so much happened. But now the hall is quiet. Now the house is at peace. In the bedroom built around the living tree, all is still. The olive trunk rises from floor to ceiling, its roots drinking deep, its branches somewhere in the dark above, a bed that cannot be moved, a love that cannot be shaken. Outside, the sea continues its ancient rhythm, waves folding onto sand, pulling back, folding again. The sound that has lulled sleepers since the world was young. Let it lull you now. The gods who watched Odysseus's journey watch over you too. Athena guards your rest. The owl calls softly from the olive grove. All is well. All is protected. You have traveled far tonight, through monsters and marvels, through loss and reunion. Now, like Odysseus, you have earned your rest. The journey is complete. Home has been reached. Sleep now, dream of wine, dark seas and rocky islands. Dream of home, whatever home means to you. And know that like Odysseus, you will always find your way back. Good night.